Shana Tova. In early 1994, my mother, Fagel Raskin, otherwise known as Iris, her memory is a blessing, was living on the 26th floor of an apartment building in LA when the earthquake hit. The building did not fall, but there was a long minute of severe shaking. When we spoke on the phone afterwards, she said to me, "My building shook, and it did not stop, and there was not a damn thing I could do about it." My mother was experiencing that greatest of human fears, to be totally out of control, a point at which we have lost all agency, when we have absolutely no power to make things go our way. And this is the year that I am coming to you. We are standing, as has become abundantly clear, in a strange and critical moment in the history of our lives, of our country, and of our world. So many of the things that we humans need, socializing with one another, a feeling of safety and stability, being able to plan the future, have been cast into chaos. It is an anxious time. So many of our ways of being honed over decades, the decades of our lives, do not fit our current circumstance. We are in a state of mourning for what we once had, and for even our very modest dreams for the near future. And yet, the new year is upon us. Our holy days follow a schedule set by the great mystery and the heavens, and will not be postponed for any mere earthly calamity. Rosh HaShanah, the literal head of the year, is a time when we look forward to a fresh start, when we celebrate the new beginnings with our hopes and expectations high. But this year, our daily reality threatens our optimism. We can no longer forecast a future even into next week. We cannot do Rosh Hashanah as we have done in the past, gathering with loved ones in joy and anticipation of a Shana Tova. So what are we to do? When we cannot depend upon our previous experience to predict the future, what we still have are the paradigms of our tradition. Hang on, my cats are fighting. I'll be right back. Okay. What are we to do? When we cannot depend upon our previous experience to predict the future, what we still have are the paradigms of our tradition. We can step into these structures of wisdom condensed over the millennia, and from them we can get a foothold to ground us. Take my hand and come time travel with me into 3 examples. First, we will put ourselves into a story from Talmud, then into our Passover story, and we'll finish by walking into a verse that is part of the Shema in our morning prayers. Rabbi Akiva lived at the time of the Roman destruction of the Second Temple in the 1st century of our Common Era, almost 2,000 years ago. We are walking with Akiva and his companions up to Jerusalem, which is still in rubble from the Roman occupation. We reach Mount Scopus and we tear our garments in anguish and in grief. When we come to the actual Temple Mount, with the temple in total ruin, we see a fox emerging from the place of the Holy of Holies. We begin to weep. Rabbi Akiva laughs, and we turn to him and say, Akiva, why are you laughing? He says to us, why are you weeping? And we say we are in a place that is so holy that it says of it, any stranger who approaches it will die. And now foxes traverse it. And shouldn't we weep? And that is why I laugh, says Akiva. For it is written, I shall have faithful witnesses, Uriah the priest and Zechariah, a prophet, bear witness for me. Now, Akiva is quoting from the prophet Isaiah, and he goes on explaining to us. Now, what is the connection between Uriah, who lived at the time of the destruction of the first temple in 586 BCE, and Zechariah, who lived when our second temple was destroyed? Our teaching makes Zechariah's prophecy dependent on Uriah's prophecy. And Uriah wrote, because of you, Zion shall be plowed as a field. Jerusalem shall become heaps, and the Temple Mount like the high places of a forest. But Zechariah wrote, old men and women shall yet sit in the streets of Jerusalem. Rabbi Akiva then continues his thought. As long as Uriah's prophecy had not been fulfilled, I feared that Zechariah's prophecy may not be fulfilled either. But now that Uriah's prophecy has been fulfilled, it is certain that Zechariah's prophecy will be fulfilled. With these words, we reply, Akiva, you have comforted us. Akiva, you have consoled us. Rabbi Akiva could see beyond the rubble to the hope of what was to come. A built-up Jerusalem, populated and at peace, with the elders sunning themselves in the town square. Just like Akiva and the sages, we are in between two states of stability. We have left a time of our recent relative social and planetary equilibrium and have entered the liminal time, the in-between time that must occur before we reconfigure our society and our world into a new order, and very likely a better order. But this is a time of great danger, as we are witnessing. Our social norms are falling apart, but it is also a time of great possibility for the reordering of our societal structures in a way that might be more just, that might prioritize the well-being of all people, that might value and regard our relationship to the planet. Let's time travel to thousands of years ago to Egypt. There is a very powerful leader who is concentrated on building the grand cities of Pitom and Ramses and tall pyramids to make a name for himself. There is a rebellion of slaves going on who want to be able to worship in their own way and free themselves of a state of oppression. There are cataclysmic weather events, polluted seas, infestations of insects, cattle disease, fiery hail, darkness at noon, and a pandemic that is killing off the firstborn of every Egyptian home, not only of people, but cattle as well. Pharaoh's counselors, who at first supported him, are beginning to see their folly, and they come to him saying, "Do you not yet know that Egypt is lost?" Finally, these bizarre happenings jolt the Pharaoh ever so briefly into a new way of thinking. He lets the slaves go, even though he later changes his mind. But it is too late. They have escaped. A tsunami pulls the waters of the sea back for them, and they make their getaway. What can this story mean to us for our time? I fear that this time we are the Egyptians, that God is trying to teach us that we must care for all segments of society, that we must see ourselves as part of an interconnected world, not a separate state whose acts have no impact on the rest of the world. And above all, that we cannot exploit the earth as we have been, using her for her resources and depositing back toxic air, water, plastic, pollution with nary a care. We needed something big, like a pandemic, to open our eyes. The very definition of the word apocalypse is revelation, an unveiling or unfolding of things not previously known, that could not be known apart from the unveiling. The earth is only trying to heal itself. COVID-19 is its immune response, getting to work, killing off what is harming it the most, humans. And terribly, terribly unfairly, it is doing so with no moral intention to the human population, which means that the most vulnerable are the ones with the least resources to resist. But I cannot end my message to you here. So let's step together into one more Jewish resource, our morning prayers. We say in the first paragraph after the Shema, Uvtuvo mechadesh b'chol yom ma'aseh v'reshit. Uvtuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid Ma'aseh Bereshit. In God's goodness, He renews every day, constantly, continually, the work of creation. In other words, creation didn't just happen once. All of creation, since the Big Bang, which, by the way, is totally consistent with our poetic account in the Torah, where God spoke and the world came into being, creation did not stop on the seventh day. The energy that came from that Big Bang, that life energy, renews itself continuously. The awesomeness of this reality impressed itself upon me when I was in Jerusalem walking to my friend's house. I passed a hedge of a beautiful grapevine, and I like little things, and on it there was a little grape leaf that was perfect, a beautiful, beautiful shape, and I couldn't resist plucking it off. And as I walked, I noticed it was drooping further and further. And 15 minutes later, by the time I got to my friend's house, it was at the point of death. This verse came to me, and I realized its life force was being renewed when it was connected to its vine. Continuously, moment to moment, it was being renewed. We know that all the elements of the earth are continually coming together, being formed, growing, blossoming into maturity, and eventually dying. And then being recreated once again into fresh life. Our social structures are the same. They last for a time until their less well-conceived parts no longer fit the times. They break apart and then need to be reassembled into something even more suitable, more perfect for the circumstances that we have learned need an update. And this is the same process and the very essence of our personal practice of teshuvah. Taking the elements of ourselves and reforming them anew into better people. The hitch is the painful in-between process, the liminal phase, when we must face our shortcomings, feel the pang of our transgressions, when the old self must come apart, but the new self is not yet built. We humans are not good with uncertainty, with ambiguity, because that is a time when we feel powerless, at the mercy of circumstance. We are not good with maybe, maybe not. Maybe something in between. Maybe something we haven't thought of yet. We don't like those maybes. We like clear-cut certainties. And so our standing at this moment in history is particularly uncomfortable for most, very painful for some, and deadly for others. We are in the tearing apart phase, the hardest phase, when the vision of what is yet to come is not clear. But our ancestors have been through many a hardship, plague, expulsion, statelessness, Holocaust. And yet, they brought us forth into the future. And our job is to retain what is best of the wisdom of our tradition, to follow its demand that we must care for the most vulnerable and that we respect and give back to our planet, that we nurture our planet. We are not to give up in despair, but rather cry out to our beloved Holy One for the strength to be present and teach and advocate for a just future. It is a new year, a time in our mystical tradition that the great mystery moves from the seat of judgment to the seat of mercy. A fertile time for moral change. Let us each do what we can to thrive, to remember, and to bring forward the lessons these hard times are teaching us into a new way of being that is being formed in this tohu vavohu, this present yet pregnant chaos, with blessings of health and strength and courage to everyone. I, from the depths of my heart, wish us all HaShanah Tova.